So this week on Main Street, we are back again here back in Clinton ShopRite with my friends Sheila and Sue. And this week, what we thought we would kind of touch on is supplementation. You know, when we're training at such high levels, obviously you heard the ladies last time around say food first, right? Fuel your body, get the calories in. But we also know that at times, endurance athletes are training at such high volumes that we actually need to consider supplementation. Okay, guys, so tell us, you know, what are some of the different types of supplements that an endurance athlete might be wanting to consider?
Well, certainly calcium, vitamin D, what I have here, vitamin D, D3 is highly absorbable form, but for bone health and particularly with vitamin D, because it is hard to get enough, especially through food, so supplementing is often a great idea, as well as calcium. Iron depending. Iron is a supplement that we don't want to take if we don't need it. Too much iron is problematic. But of course, too little is absolutely problematic. And for an endurance runner, you know, we do lose iron in our sweat. We want to replace those iron losses. So if you find that your ferritin levels are low or your hemoglobin is low, you know, you do want to consider supplementation then too. So those are, I think, big ones.
So, you know, are these things that someone would have to go get blood tests for? Would they start to kind of notice, like exhibit some sort of symptoms? Like how would someone know if they should be thinking about taking a vitamin D, you know, supplement or an iron supplement? What are some things that they might kind of like cue them off to look a little further?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one thing is just doing a diet check-in. So either with Sheila or with me or with any of the dietitians in our stores, we can do a food journal and we could look through what you're eating and kind of determine if you're meeting the basic estimated amounts. So that's one avenue. Secondly, if you're feeling off, so if you're feeling really fatigued, if you're not recovering very well, one, it could be insufficient calorie intake. So again, underscoring you need to eat enough because that also masks or presents itself as fatigue and recovery, you know, time just increasing. But also iron, of course, if you're feeling fatigued, run down, that could be a sign of iron deficiency. Getting cold very easily, which of course is also a sign of insufficient calories though too. So there's a little bit of, you know, overlap there that we could tease apart.
And muscle spasms too, you know, again, do you have enough magnesium, you know,
electrolytes, right?
So you want to, again, look at what is their overall diet, you know, sometimes it's very carb loaded and it's not, you know, again, those the five food groups. So it's really important to really take that food journal as you mentioned and take a look at that. Food recall, put it on your phone. You don't have to, I always say you bite it, you write it, you snack it, you track it, keep on top of it, you know.
Yeah,
it's important.
Totally. No, that makes a ton of sense. You know, and I know that a lot of times, specifically female endurance athletes, people that are training at very, very high volumes kind of have this iron issue. It tends to be something that presents in younger athletes quite a bit, but I know a lot of experienced female marathoners who have kind of struggled with this. So if you could kind of give us an idea, like, why is that?
Well, certainly, again, we lose iron in your sweat, so that's another loss. For women who are menstruating, you're losing iron regularly each month, so there's another loss. And then you may not be eating sufficient calories to get the iron from the foods that you need. And one thing with iron, it's absorbed better if you have it with vitamin C-rich foods. So if you have your, let's say,
tangerines,
yes,
nice,
or a kiwi or a strawberry or citrus fruit,
red pepper
with your meal, yes, a tomato even, that's high vitamin C. It's going to increase the iron from your beans, from your whole grains, and that will, of course, help you get better iron absorption. Mm-hmm. And then also another thing, cooking in cast iron.
Oh yes.
If you have cast iron skillets, I love cooking.
A 20-pound pan.
Yes, you get bicep, but you also get the iron from the pan.
Is that right?
Especially if you cook with tomatoes, for example. The vitamin C will help you absorb a little extra iron. It's an element, right?
Sure.
It's a mineral, so you get increased iron that way. That's an important tip too. Some foods interfere with iron absorption, and they're foods that we want you to take. So calcium will interfere with your iron absorption. If you're drinking milk after you have a high iron food, you're not going to absorb as much iron. You are going to get your calcium. And this, though, is where we need to talk because we want you to get your calcium, but we just don't want your calcium to interfere with your iron or vice versa. And this is where
you kind of stagger it or
track it. Sheila was talking about, and we mentioned, if you journal it, we can review it and we can optimize. So you optimize your calcium intake, maybe with your vitamin D, and you optimize your iron intake with your vitamin C, and we can make sure you're maximizing.
That makes total sense. And there's a couple things you said in there that I think are important to key in on. And, so as some of the folks in the RISE community, some, I won't say all, are kind of getting into that more experienced part of life where, bone structure is something they're paying attention to. And the risk of osteoporosis or osteopenia are things that they're starting to key in a little bit on. You talked about calcium, you talked about vitamin D. What I kind of took from some of the things you said is that, look, like, you kind of, food is first, right? We hit on that last episode. But when you're really wanting to kind of dial this thing in, like really look detailed, get with a professional, obviously. And you guys are here available for those kind of services. But specific to bone health, you mentioned calcium, you mentioned vitamin D. Talk to me a little bit about that. What are some things that I should be thinking about? What are some things that maybe I should be doing to really maximize that?
Well, I'm going to play the same tape over and over again, but adequate calorie intake. So if you do not have adequate calorie intake, you're going to have effects in your hormones. Your estrogen levels are going to be impacted. Estrogen helps build bone, so now you're going to be building bone at a lower rate. So we have to make sure you're getting enough calories.
Okay.
So important for bone health, especially for women. If you're missing your periods because of inadequate calorie intake, whether it's because you're training so much, and even though you're eating a lot of food, it's just not enough to keep up with the exercise, that will hit your bones in a negative way. So we really have to make sure you're getting enough, which is also important. But then there are high calcium foods, right?
Sure.
So Sheila, you had found a whole bunch of great calcium foods out there in the aisles.
Oh yeah, and we can actually show you those as well. We have a whole basket full in my office, but again, there are a lot of enriched foods out there. There's enriched noodles, there's enriched cereals, there's enriched milk alternatives,
like the Ripple milk.
The Ripple milk has like 40% calcium.
It's a pea protein based milk. So for folks who aren't drinking your traditional cow milk, let's say, and dairy yogurts, that would be a good source of calcium. Now we can get them in a plant-based form.
We have everything between cashew, almond, you name it. We have all different types of yogurts that are not dairy based. So for those that might not be able to absorb dairy or have a food allergy, a protein issue.
We also have my sardines. So when you get sardines with the bones, you're getting the calcium from those bones. You're getting vitamin D. So now those two together, calcium with vitamin D, we're maximizing the calcium absorption. We also have leafy greens. A lot of leafy
collard greens, right?
Collard greens, bok choy. There's a lot of greens that have good amounts of calcium so that we can supplement that way, which is super important.
Absolutely.
And again, arranging it so that we're focusing on a calcium promoting meal, and then separating out the iron foods so that we get both of those important nutrients without competing. Very important for our endurance runners, especially our female.
Totally. Makes a ton of sense. So I think, when we look at this thing, it can get complicated, right? It can get complicated. Thankfully, we have professional resources here that can kind of help us navigate that complicated path at times, but get the big stuff right? Eat the, kind of diverse food, hit those different macronutrients like you said. But when we want to dial it in, when we're experiencing something that we have to kind of take a closer look at or maybe kind of, throws a flare up in our mind to look at closer, let's hit up these guys and utilize the resource that is available to us. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you're pretty awesome.
I like it. Pretty awesome. Not a bad. That's good. We should close on that, guys. So we have covered supplementation. Thank you guys for your time today. Tune in next week for more and more from the resources here at ShopRite, the Colorado family, the Hunterdon County ShopRite, Yardley, Bethlehem, everywhere. You can't go anywhere on the East Coast and not be able to access these guys. Tune in next time.